Hey guys, quickly wanted to jump on and just say thanks so much for being here. I popped the slider on the before and after. This is what we're going to be working on today. And yeah, I'm going to get straight into the edit pretty soon. I just wanted to say thanks again. And if you do see this on one of the social platforms, please feel free to give me a shout out or leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, it will help me grow it. It's not something I do to force content. I quite enjoy this, so I only do this when I have time. So it's not something you'll see me pushing, but I do appreciate it. And yeah, it's something I'm very passionate about, and hopefully you can pick up a few of my tips and tricks. It is something I didn't find other people putting out there too often. I think there's a lot of lying with regards to editing and wildlife editing, and people are caught up in ethics. My only ethics that I follow is transparency. So I'll do what I want, but I'll be transparent about it. So I do have a couple of things that I personally don't do, but I don't care what other people do. So you can do what you want. And I'd say just be transparent about it if people do ask. So don't do anything you won't be happy about being transparent with. All right. Then basically my editing process is quite simple. I stick to a couple of fundamentals, but then I do enjoy it. It is an artistic, I guess, representation for me. I am an artist at heart, and this is a big part of it. So a bit of my background, I used to guide at Mala Mala, where this photo was taken in the Greater Kruger National Park. I moved to Brisbane in Australia with my wife a couple of years ago. She studies there, and now I found myself between Africa and Australia and pursuing wildlife photography as a huge passion of mine, and shifting from a hobbyist to a professional in, I guess, whatever sense of the word you want to interpret that. So we're going to jump straight in. Please feel free to give me a shout out or ask questions. I will get back to you as soon as I can and tell you exactly what I'm doing and what my process is. All right. So one of the few things that I do have set rules on is eyes. So when I photograph, I make sure the eyes are sharp. So when I say that, you can't always make sure the eyes are sharp. So this photo is probably one of a sequence of about 20, and there's about 5 of them where the eyes were really crisp. So make sure your eyes are crisp. Right? Otherwise, you might as well discard that photo. You can fix bad lighting with editing. You cannot fix a photo that's out of focus. I just don't think you can use it personally. Right, then here we're just fixing the chromatic aberration. You'll see that very purpley color. So I'm going to remove the magnifier now, but then you'll see when I toggle it, it just where the dark areas meet the very bright areas, it creates that purple. It's not an important part of the image, so I'm not too worried about that in this photo, but you can see how it removes it there. It takes a whole chunk away. And then this is just the profile correction. So the Lightroom, which is the program I'm using here to edit, does read the metadata and it knows which profile or what lens I've used, and then it applies a correction to that. All right. So then when we edit, basically a couple of things. I go from top to bottom. You can do it however you want, different sequences, but there's a few set rules. When using the temperature slider, it's not to create warmth that doesn't exist. It's to try and replicate the light that was there. We're trying to do accurate raw processing, which is this. What this is, it's a raw photo. So we are doing the processing. This is what most people allow their cameras to do. And I highly recommend you get into raw photos as soon as you possibly can. Even if you're an amateur, shoot in RAW and JPEG and then learn editing. It's a phenomenally rewarding thing to do. It makes your photos really come to life. All right. Exposure I've just pulled up there. Contrast in Lightroom is a lie. It's mid-tone contrast. They should call that mid-tone contrast. It's basically the dark grays and the light grays becoming darker and lighter respectively. It's not true contrast. True contrast is where your blacks go black and your whites go white. So it means there's true contrast from black to white through the range. And that's where we use the histogram. That's something I'll do in a later video. Then with highlights, you'll see I'm going to show you the clipping now. When you drag these sliders, you can push Alt and then drag them, and then it'll show you where there's clipping within your photo. And by clipping, I mean in the white areas, there's no more, if there's too bright in the white areas, there's no more data like you'll see there, and there's no detail in that area. And in the black areas, if it's too black, there's no detail there left. So I want to have detail in my photos. Sometimes the sky, like this particular photo, the sky I'm not going to worry about, and you'll see that a little bit later because there's no detail there in any case, so that I'm trying to retain. Right, then with the shadows, you can pull the shadows up, just look carefully, and it does enhance the noise, but I really prioritize noise removal within my photos, not just noise reduction, but noise removal, especially as someone who prints their photos. It's very important to remove your noise, because when you do print and you sharpen for printing, you don't want there to be noise, right? Then we're going to jump into the blacks. Obviously, this is where we create the contrast through the blacks and the whites. So the blacks to be nice and black and the whites to be nice and white. So you'll see it changes the photo just by doing these simple little tweaks. Then quite importantly, we also do have these creative sliders, the dehaze and clarity, which you just be careful with them, that's all. They're beautiful and it's easy to crank them up to 100, but just be careful with them. I'll just quickly jump back in here to see that my blacks weren't clipping too bad. You'll see there's a lot of detail being lost in that spot or the rosette, and I didn't want that, so I just lift that up a little bit, right? So the histogram's touching the left side and the right side quite nicely. It means the blacks are black and the whites are white, and I'm pretty happy with that. And we're going to jump into the noise removal here. There's no sharpening that I do in Lightroom. I take that completely away. I sharpen only in Photoshop. And I know my numbers here, I've already gone through it, but when I say with noise, I completely remove it. Noise removal is per photo. So when I create photos, I'm not creating a lot of bulk, so I can do this individually. I only do a couple of photos at a time, and that makes it quite easier, the process quite easy. All right, just see that I'm showing you no sharpening whatsoever. Then we're going to jump into Photoshop pretty soon. Yeah, sorry, I really reiterated no sharpening. I've narrated this after I edited the photo. So I just right click there, edit in, and then Adobe Photoshop is going to open it. So as I was saying, I'm narrating this now, watching my editing, if that makes sense. So that's why some things don't always align, but I'm just trying to explain it the best I can. The editing can take very long, so I cut them down sometimes. It just depends on what I'm doing and how much time I've got. Like when I edited this, I was watching the US Open final and I had a glass of wine and I was just really enjoying it, taking a bit of time, and I'll speed up a couple of processes. All right. Here you'll see, I'm going to talk quickly, but my main editing technique is using levels. It's really simple, really basic. It works with the brights, the darks, and then the midtones, which is what I've changed there. I've just really brought down the midtones in this photo. It was quite a dark scene, not as dark as this, but I like that, and I like what I'm trying to create there, and I'm going to bring up the whites in the Leopard soon. All right, so it's basically a simple concept of using levels and then also using masks to say I want you to work on certain areas of the photo. So what I'm clicking there is the quick mask. So you see when I click it, the layers go green, and then it says quick mask in the name of the photo at the top left. So when I'm working on that, I'm taking a brush and then a black brush, a very soft black brush, and then I'm going to paint on the photo where I want to make adjustments on my next layer. So the green is basically just telling me where I'm going to have a selection. So this is to create the selection, to tell yourself where the selection is. You don't have to be too precise with this. You can be quite rough with the selection because we're going to have a really soft edge. The trick is to use a soft brush. Never use hard brushes. And then you're going to paint. I'm going to speed this up, and you paint all along the leopard's body, because this is where I'm going to make my first major adjustment and first, let me say, local adjustment. All right, you do have tools like this in Lightroom. I don't like them. I just use it in Photoshop. In Lightroom, I just do basic edits, because then later, if I want to go back and edit again, I can just come and do it in Photoshop again. So I have one base to work from, and then the rest is just the creative edits in Photoshop. Yeah. All right. So you'll see I toggle between the white and the black. Black paints green, which is selection in this case, and white will erase it. So pretty simple. Now I'm just going to paint in the whole leopard. I'm not doing it very neatly here. You will see I speed it up later again when I tweak these. I'll talk you through to refine the selection, because basically when I'm done painting this in green, I'm then going to click Q again, which is the shortcut, or just click the quick mask little tab at the bottom there, and that basically gives me a selection. So then you have the little marching ants that show you where your selection is and where you'll be working on in the photo, which means I'm only going to be making an adjustment to this green layer here on my next levels adjustment, or whichever levels or whichever adjustment you click. So if I were to know click Hue, it's going to give me the selection, and then I can click hue and saturation, for example, and it will only work on the hue and saturation on the leopard itself. So I went into a bit of details here. I did touch this up later. It gets a bit tricky with all the leaves and that, but because you use such a soft brush, you don't really have to worry, and because we're not making major adjustments. If you make major adjustments, you do have to be very precise with your masking. All right. So I've clicked Q, the quick mask, and I'm going to click levels again, and now it's made a levels layer with that mask applied. So you see where the white is shining through, that's where we're working on, and the black is not shining through. Obviously with levels, it's top to bottom, so what's showing. All right, so now I've just pulled up the whites on the leopard, and you can see what a difference that makes in it, and a slight adjustment I think I made on the midtones there. You see the before and afters of that. I think it is quite phenomenal what difference it does make, and that leopard already stands out. All right. So now I've jumped in, I'm taking a brush again, I'm working on the mask, and I'm just going to use a white brush because white on masks reveals and black hides. So we're going to be revealing more of this photo and more of this levels layer on top of the photo. And I just want to refine the edges around the ears and the rest of the leopard. You see, I wasn't very tight to the edge and I wanted it a bit tighter. So when I alt click on the mask, it shows me where it's showing through, and the black shows me where it's hiding. Right. So I'm just going to paint this right to the edge. You'll see how it's changing. Sorry, the little mouse toggle doesn't show you too clearly, but you can see it's getting brighter there on those edges where it didn't work. Right. And then if you make a mistake, Control Z, and you can also just always click X to switch between black and white in your foreground and black color and foreground and, or let's say background colors, and then paint in, because black hides and white shows, or white reveals, however you want to say it. Then I think here is where I saw the belly to me, if I'm not mistaken, or was it a little bit later? Let's see. So I'm just toggling the layers there to see what it looks like. I think it's very important in the editing process to say to know where you came from and where you're trying to go and what you're trying to have. So I had a vision in my head of what I wanted to achieve with this photo. So we're doing another levels layer. I've done this because I want to brighten the whites up a little bit. I was almost testing a little bit to see, you'll see how the sky overexposes there. It doesn't bother me because I'm not worried about that detail. There is no detail there to worry about really. But I did this on two separate layers. I could have done this on the bottom layer, but I wanted to see and have the ability to toggle it later. So that's why I've got two of those levels layers that are overall levels layers, for example. Then we're going to work on, this is the leaves, so I'm going to speed this up again. So you see all these green leaves here, they're actually a little tinge yellow for me. I don't like that too much, but we're going to adjust that later. So now all I'm doing is a quick mask again, making sure my foreground color is black. And then I'm going to paint on all of these leaves here. And pretty much all the dark areas in the photo, I want to do selective adjustments around them and not the sky or the sky coming through the leaves. So I'm going to paint all of these here. You'll see this is sped up, so it's really fast. I'm not that quick when I work. But yeah, so you see I'm going to make all these adjustments here, and then basically clicking Q again, that has now given me a selection. When I click my levels, it's going to give me an adjustment layer with the mask applied, the white shining through and the black not. And I really want to bring those down nice and tight, those blacks. I want to make this look really black. One thing it has done when I click Alt, you'll see it has completely over or underexposed some areas. So it's made them really black with no detail. So that's where I'm going to jump in, and you'll see me soon. I'm also going to speed it up when I do that. But I'm going to jump in and I'm going to take my brush, still a soft brush at 50% opacity. You'll see I'm going to change it up at the top here to 50%, and it's still going to be, then this brush color will be black because I want to remove some of this effect. So I want to paint black. Remember, black hides. I don't want to remove all of it, but I want to remove some of it, so to make sure. So I'm going to set my foreground color to black, so I'm painting in black, and it's at 50%, so technically I'm painting in gray at this time, right? And then you can see all these parts here, I'm going to speed it up, but where it's gone really black, I'm just painting over to hide that effect on them, so it's not completely black, because it deteriorates the photo. You'll see on the bark here, things like that. There's still a lot of detail there I want to retain. I don't want to remove all of that. Right, I'm working 3 times, sped this up 3 times, that's why it's very fast. But it's just to make sure that you still retain detail in those areas. Right? And then always toggling, Alt toggle to go from all the layers off, only the one that you clicked, and then just going through them to make sure I'm liking what I'm seeing. Right? So we're not too far. We're going to start doing a couple of the creative aspects of this edit soon. And I think what happens, yeah, that's exactly what happens here. So basically on this part of the mask, you'll see the leopard's hind or rear end isn't really have any of this effect. So I just wanted to paint it with white to give it more of the levels layer that we applied there onto the leopard. So it looks more realistic, because then the tail's like, or the tail end is very bland, and then the front is much brighter and much whiter. So we're going to paint all of this. I'm going to speed this up too, but you'll see we're going to paint this with a thin brush. Make sure your foreground color is set to white, and then you can sort of almost see it immediately when you paint it on, how much of a difference it makes, making the whites white and the blacks black. A couple of gaps there that I also painted in, and I think this is also where I realized that the belly of this leopard was too dark. I've just removed the point of focus so that you can see where I'm painting, and you can see the difference it makes there. And then I noticed here that the belly is too bright here, especially on the left now of the screen there. It just doesn't look good. It doesn't look realistic. Remember, if you make a mistake, just Control Z or Control Z, depending on where you are in the world. So I did notice that belly, and I'm pretty sure I also used the brush at 50% opacity here to just reduce that with black, so it has 50% of the effect. Yeah, there we go. Bigger brush, remember, still nice and soft. Make sure your foreground color is set to black in this case. Right, nice and big brush. Just painting over that, just so it doesn't have as much of an effect. It just takes away that very bright white area. It looks almost unrealistic then. I've quite a keen eye for and attention to detail, but also don't get caught up in the details too much. Like, it's still just a fun process. I mean, you can always earn changes, you can always make slight adjustments, especially if you're just doing this for social media, things like that. I think it's cool to share things like that. The world needs more of this. So I wanted to do some more adjustments on the face of the leopard. Instead of painting it green again, I've basically gone and control clicked on that layer mask. It's reselected it, and I've pressed Q to make the quick mask. And then I've just gone in and made the little adjustments, painting with black to add green and painting with white to remove it. And now I've got a selection of just the face. So now I want to just brighten up the face. I wanted the face to be a little bit brighter than the body. So nothing too serious, but just a slight bit. So that's what we've done here. And then coming up, you'll notice I noticed that the leopard looks a little bit too yellow. It doesn't look like a wild leopard to me, especially at that time where it is within the canopy. Although the light's beautiful and gold, it was still within the canopy there. So I've just controlled or shift clicked all of those layers and said control G to make a group, and those are just my adjustments. So I like to make them in a group. I can also just toggle the group on and off then to see what I've done. All right, now we're going to make an overall levels layer. And this levels layer, I'm going to type it out for us. It's called mid-tone contrast. So this is where you make the dark grays darker and the light grays lighter. So it's called mid-tone contrast. It's not true contrast. So it works on the mid-tones. And all I do with this is I add the levels layer and you create a soft light blending mode there. So obviously that's really drastic. So you take that from 100% opacity, and I work at around 25 or 20%. I don't do too much of this. It's not something that I find that necessary to have too strong. You see when I toggle it, it doesn't make too much of an impact in this one. Some photos work better than others, but I didn't think it needed that much mid-tone contrast. I thought the overall contrast was really strong and powerful and didn't need to compensate with mid-tone contrast in a creative sense. All right. Then I'm going to add this another adjustment layer, and basically I want to create more of a hazy look to the background of the leopard and a more matte look. So I'm pulling in the white slider there and I'm pulling in the blacks on this side. So you'll see the whole photo becomes almost grayish and dullish. It looks like an old school type photo. And then all I've done is I've clicked the selection of the leopard, and I'm going to make a black mask on that layer there so that it doesn't impact the leopard. So that's why you see the leaves are but not the leopard. The leaves in the background are but not the leopard. I then realized how yellow this leopard looked because of that, because we're making a lot of adjustments. I didn't like that, so I put a hue and saturation layer, and I'm just pulled down the entire saturation. I'm looking at the leopard at the moment. I'm not looking at the background because I can always apply a mask. So I just wanted it to look more authentic and more leopard-like, and also to set the tone for the, I guess, the dark and eerie, not dark and eerie, but the more darker mood from this photo. So I pulled that down. I then realized that I didn't like the desaturated look too much, and then that I would rather do this with a channel mixer layer. So channel mixer is something I'm still figuring out and playing with, but I'm getting better and better as we go. What I didn't do is I didn't delete the hue and saturation layer. I just clicked the eye to put it off so I can always go back to it and compare it. And then basically how the channel mixer works is when the color you've chosen, if you say green at the top, it's basically adding or removing that color to the different channels. So you can add green, take green away from green and add it to the blue. Those three numbers have to add up to 100 to retain the same light. You'll see I go back and forth here. I didn't like my first adjustment, so now I'm going to go work in the red layer. So adding red to the green channel, and then I'm going to remove it from the red channel just a little bit. Right? So you'll see I just toggle around here. I work in about 10s and 20s, and again those three numbers need to add to 100, and then you can see I'm trying to create a much more let's say bluish green on the leaves. So this is where it happens. Remove blue from the blue channel and I add it to the green channel, so that's where we get that effect. So I really like that. I thought it was quite subtle, but it had the impact that I wanted. So this is pretty much where I finish up with the edit. So that's the creative process. From here I will save it, Control S to save your main PSD file, and then I will crop it here in the the dimensions that I needed depending on where I'm sharing it. If it's a photo that I'm printing or if it's for social media, I use the crop tool. And then after I've cropped it, I copy the layer and then I will sharpen. So sharpening is a very precise process and something I do as the last step. I don't save JPEGs or don't save the PSD after I've sharpened. You only save it after your adjustments, and you always come in and crop again if you need to. So that's pretty much it. This is done, and I'll show you the before and after.